Hi everyone, welcome to this new edition of the Knowledge Espresso. I am today with Sebastian Schmidt, who is the CEO of metaphacts, and we are here for maybe 45 minutes to discuss about knowledge graphs, data management, and AI in enterprise. Hi Sebastian, how are you?
François, doing good, thanks.
Great. So I'm where are you right now?
I'm in back in Waldorf again, so basically in close to our Colosseum.
So this is located, where is it in Germany?
It's south of Frankfurt, like 1 hour south of Frankfurt.
1 hour south of Frankfurt. Great. How was the weather today?
It's raining all day.
Oh no, I'm sorry. And it's not bad today in New York. It's a little gray but getting sunnier. We had a very cold day yesterday. It was like 8 degrees Celsius. Yeah, and rain. But spring seems to be finally coming. So Metafacts based there. How long have you? How old is Metafacts?
Yeah, so I mean, we are based here, but by now the team I think is quite distributed across the world. Peter started the company in 2014, so we are celebrating 10 years in October this year. It's going to be a big party, the whole team coming together, and already everyone's looking forward to that.
Sounds good. 10 years. Yeah, that's a great mark. And when Peter, you can Peter Hazen, who's your co-founder, and then you took over, or you took over after. Anyways, I don't think the details matter too much at that point. But it's great to see the evolution, at least of the software, and how stable it has become. Um,
Yeah.
and you have a background, you have a technical background, right, in semantic technologies.
But interestingly, I'm probably one of the few people in the company that does not have a strong background in that field. So Peter founded it and gathered a team of really knowledge graph experts, people with a long-standing history and yeah, commitment to that technology stack. Um, he grew the company, and I actually only joined the thing in 2019. So I worked with knowledge graphs before, actually also with Peter in a different startup and several other members of the current team. And back then it was not very successful. It was, I think we were too early for the topic. Started in like 2008, and many people did not really understand what we are talking about with those graphs and all of the semantic web stuff. And so it was a tough time then. But he trusted that this is gonna change. He tried it another time. Recently he found it himself. And in 2019, he reached out and he was like, "Well, this is really kicking off. Everyone is talking about it. It is a big topic." And I was at uh, a public cloud provider, mostly the healthcare and SAP space. So I was like, well, it's cool to hear that this technology finally um, resonates with the market. So that is when I joined metaphacts, and a little time later, we decided to adjust the roles in the organization. Peter's focusing on the R&D side, pushing forward the product, and I took the CEO role and pushing on the sales and the business development.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you for that that background story. It's interesting. 2019 is also the year that the Knowledge Graph Conference was founded. That our first event at Columbia University. So yeah, sounds like great things happened that
Yeah.
year. Uh, um, So I guess now we have background and so you're operating in multiple countries. You have people in multiple countries. You have clients in multiple countries as well. That sounds
Yes,
great.
yes. So
Mm-hmm.
Europe is still a super important hub for us, and this is obviously where we started out with customers in Germany and then across Europe. We see the Nordics being very strong with knowledge graphs, lots of implementations. But then also North America, and we have customers even in Singapore.
Cool, great. And then maybe in a nutshell, just for our audience, people who may not know metaphacts platform, what that and let's say in a nutshell, and then we will then dive into enterprise data management and more the deeper background and context. Do you want to describe the platform?
Yeah, a bit. So the metaphacts platform sits on top of a knowledge graph. So we can assuming there's a knowledge graph database or something that is hosting that graph, because it didn't feel like the world needs another graph database. But what we saw was really missing was something that helps people interact with the graph. So in the beginning, that was primarily things like searching, discovering, exploring the graph, being able to kind of build a user experience that is graph native. And that was where we started out of the product. Over the years, we saw that there is another really critical part missing, which is the actual modeling and building of the graph. So modeling ontologies, vocabularies, building alignments in the graph, even editing instance data, curating data in the graph. Was not well supported by existing tooling. It's not really a database functionality. It's something that usually sits on top. And there was not really a strong set of tools serving that, especially for the kind of standard business user. So there are some very specific tools for people with a deep technology background that mostly came out of academia, those tools. But the business user was what was not so well supported. So we took those things as the core functionality for Metafactory, our product.
Great, sounds good. So now that we have that all the background about you metafacts and the product, let's dive more into use cases and how do you see the the enterprise data management landscape evolving? What is the role of knowledge graphs in that landscape? So maybe to put you on track, we can we see that there's an evolution in terms of enterprises having more and more data to manage, the need for tools, methods to manage this data processes, and so data lakes and other architectures where there and all this allows to be more agile when using the data, when developing applications, training machine learning models, enabling AI, all of this. So how do you see where do you see knowledge graphs are needed in that context, right? Where are they? Where do you position the knowledge graphs? What is the need for something else than the actual system? What are the issues? Maybe first let's start with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would maybe take this a few steps back again on where we saw initial use cases and then where we see that transitioning now. So in the beginning, the core use case was I have a number of data sources and I have to bring them together. I have a question I want to answer, and currently I can't because the data is distributed, it's not integrated, it's not harmonized. So I have the typical fair data problem. It's maybe findable, it's maybe accessible, but it's not interoperable, it's not reusable. I can't really, support my use case of it. So in the beginning, it was very much about bringing certain data sources together, putting a front end in top that supports that specific information need I have, and supporting a user with that. And what we have seen is that such use cases have quickly matured into additional use cases built against that. So let's say a project started out in maintenance and support around the customer's products. So we were bringing together customer data, maintenance reports, product configuration information, maybe warehouse capacity for spare parts, and creating the system where you could easily put that all together and then be more efficient when you go to the customer and do maintenance on the system. Now, once you have that in place, you surely had other teams coming around and being like, oh, that's interesting, because we have an information need and you can already like 80% supply it. If you would just add that extra data source, you could do it completely within. So we had people looking into supply chain or generally optimizing warehouse capacities, or then from the product lifecycle management side. We said, well, if you already know the pieces that are failing at customers most often, and you know the construction of our product from the different parts, and you know which parts we regularly have on stock and which we can easily get and which ones we have more problems to be stock, then you actually know a lot of things of how we could optimize our products, and we would utilize that data for that as well. Or our sales or marketing teams get interested in that, be like, well, I could actually map that up to existing account activities and understand if I can upsell them to a different service plan or to a new product because they are continuously running into problems with their outdated product they are using. And graphs were growing from that one use case to many more, and that data integration was the core thing behind it. And what we have seen over the last years is that another use case has emerged a lot, which is what you already mentioned about information architecture, or really managing the data sources effectively. Because none of the existing solutions like data lakes and so really gave you that capability. So instead of just putting it all together, people wanted to be able to model where is the data, what exactly is that the data that we have there, where is it utilized? So tying into a graph, saying, well, this data source is utilized in this application. It is supplying this information. It is part of these processes, business processes. It is managed by these people. Creating a completely, additional graphs that is the support, then again, for the same use cases, but from the view of someone else, instead of from the view of a business user modeling their business domain and bringing the data together, we're now modeling on an enterprise architecture, information architecture level, and then tying that into the business model, and then provide the use case, which makes it much easier to first, get a holistic view of information available at all, which is especially for very large corporations even more important. And then obviously there's the latest use case everyone's talking about, and that is building a trust layer for AI.
That.
Yeah, so what we see there is that customers have this ambition to utilize UI, so either to make it even easier for humans to interact with the data, because by now you had to do search, you had to do queries, you had to build a custom experience where they can explore it because they are not good at querying usually, those business users. And the idea now is, well, let's give them a prompt. Let them say what they want, and then execute that and give them the response back. Or the idea that we can actually automate some of the decisions. So applying AI and machine learning to this, and not needing a person to ask the question anymore, but maybe only needing a human in the loop to make a decision of yes or no, we want to do this, or it's not a good idea. And that is where we see that graphs can be a very important trust layer to support that and enable such functionality.
So, how do you work with the existing systems? You mentioned so building a graph for a specific scenario, and then that scenario gets expanded somehow, and other departments want to use that data. How does it work? If you mentioned the marketing department, I assume they may have um, a specific database.
Yeah.
How how is that working? Do you import the data in the database or
Yeah, so what we see is that that's a problem on two different layers, and we are targeting them in a completely different ways. So the first one is again this modeling topic. So the relevant department has to be involved in this. They have to understand. So first of all, they have to supply what the information need actually is, and they will do that in their own language, which already means the way marketing or sales talks about the topic is completely different than if you talk to product management or if you talk to the engineering or maintenance team. They will use different terms for potentially the same thing, and they might use the same term for completely different things. And to make sure that we don't have any confusions and issues with that, and also no wrong interpretation of data, we make sure that they are involved in the actual ontology modeling. So they help us build the semantic schema on that. And we give them existing schemas to also understand what data do we have, how we can supply that. And then kind of layer their ontology on top of that, so they have the correct interpretation for their use case. The same thing as the actual physical integration. So you somehow have to get to that data. And we can do that via federation, which kind of assumes that the existing database has the capacity to handle additional load, and the structure of the data somehow allows efficient queries in the way that users want to do them, which unfortunately is not always the case. So that means we have the second option of materializing the data in the graph. The third functionality we have in Metafactory itself. That is something where we have a number of partners we work together with. That could be an existing incumbent solution that the customer has a existing ETL pipeline or something. Or that could be a partner we bring in to supply that functionality. Because that's, again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. The idea is where we see a gap, where we hear from our customers that is a gap they have, and where no tool can close that properly, that is where we do invest in.
so in that scenario, you're putting your platform in the hands of the business users in your marketing department, so they do the modeling of their domain themselves. That's how it works, and then
Yes.
what is the role that will take this over? And is there any specific training, or is your tool like does it require any technical semantic technology training, or how is that working?
It doesn't really require training on semantic technology. You don't need to know OWL or SHACL or anything like that. However, good modeling needs training. So it's not like, someone can put you in front of an interface, no matter how well designed it is, and you've got to do proper modeling. You need to know what to look out for, the questions you have to ask yourself to do the modeling correct. And for that, we offer an academy. So it's a mix of learning how to model correct and how to model in our tool. So some of the specifics of how it works, how the governance workflows, the versioning, and everything you need around that is, how you can configure that and how you can use that and utilize that in your organization. As a standardized training, we offer that on a monthly basis, and we are in progress to also offer that more and more as a kind of prepared training where users still have, that's the important part, their own exercises they can run, but where they don't need an active trainer to be available. And then can later on follow up with a trainer in a Q&A session if they have additional questions, so that we can manage even more people to get them through that and enable them to this.
So you are training data modelers and specializing them to your platform. How does it help if someone has SQL database modeling experience training versus not?
Well, it's usually helpful if people already have some experience in modeling. It is not always helpful if they have experience with something like SQL, because they might be thinking about it in a completely different way. And we might have to untrain some of that before we can train them the way the modeling works in the semantic world. However, we see people usually picking that up really quickly. So those training sessions are 2-hour sessions, and to go through the modeling program is basically 2 of those sessions.
You want to say more about what is different? How is this thinking different?
So people who come more from the database side, they are more thinking in table structures, in fixed pre-prepared models, and they are thinking in how do I store my data efficiently and how do I persist it, rather than the thinking of, well, what's actually my domain, what is my data about, how would a user query this data, which is why we do have enterprise information architects involved very often in this exercise, and we have people from the IT side very often involved, but kind of the final modeling decision lies with the subject matter expert, lies with the business user, because they need to, in the end, understand the model. It needs to be their domain that is correctly represented, so that they can later on ask the questions they want to ask.
So the business users, they are used to what, Excel?
They are very often used to Excel spreadsheets, yes, when they just copy data from various sources and bring it into a structure that makes sense to them, yes.
And so they're used to retrieve their data. So I'm trying to think. So the business user should be able to formulate a problem, right? To formulate what question they want to find out of the data. Is that something that we can think? And I'm always I always like to be forward thinking and exploratory in and so I'm wondering, right? Thinking freely there. Is there a way to go from that business requirement to the model, the data model? Is there an abstraction that can be used, or are there new possibilities now with AI to go from one to the other, such that these particular aspects of the technical aspects around data modeling, what you mentioned, can somehow be avoided, and the tool can directly be put in the hand of the SMEs.
Yes. Yeah, we strongly believe so. This is something where Peter and the team are already actively working on, where we actively have research going on. That has, on the one side, it is turning something like competency questions into problems. On the other side, it is harnessing the structures of existing data sources, which often are further away from how the business user thinks about it, but might also give some first indication. And then basically taking that together, so taking the structure of the data sources we have, taking the competence dimensions from the user, and through that kind of mapping that and suggesting the optimal ontology, which then the user can just confirm and maybe adjust where needed. That is it is obviously a massive improvement in time overall, but it's a massive improvement to the empty canvas problem. So starting with a clean slate, empty canvas, and then putting that first element there is where most people struggle. So once you have a set of ontologies, once you have done some of the work, it becomes much easier because you can follow certain patterns, you can just adopt what you're seeing. But getting past that first step is hard. And the only way we have for that today is by providing existing industry standard ontologies, existing blueprints that we can bring along, that we have or utilize in our projects. But especially if we embark into a completely new domain, we completely rely on that subject matter expert to make that first step.
Mm-hmm.
AI certainly will make this much better and much easier.
Yeah, that's great. So, you mentioned competence questions, and you didn't mention data, right? Bringing data to the equation in order to derive the model from the data. Is that also something you're experimenting with?
Yeah, I mean, I would be, so currently we are mostly looking at the structure of the data, but obviously validating that with sample data is important. And that's something we already do today. So when you create a model, you can right away validate that against sample data. You can look at sample data that you might have, that you integrated with that to see, does that make sense? Because very often something that on a model level might make sense to you. The moment you explore the actual data that's tied into it, you're like, no, that's actually not how it is. That's not reflecting the reality correctly. Or we also have capabilities to generate sample data. And so you can quickly, type up a few data sets based on the model you have. To then also see, does that actually feel right? Is the structure correct? And is it the way that the user has imagined that to be?
Great. So that's so that's interesting. So once you have built your data model, how do you realize the mapping? So your tool helps with that, mapping your data model to the data you're bringing in?
So we don't have again, you can do federation. So what we basically do is we allow it to define a query against the REST API or SQL database or wherever your data is that maps the data into the ontology. But it's not an automatic thing that the user has to make that definition. Or the other thing, if you have an actual need to transform it into the graph, then that's completely out of our scope, where we use our solutions that would help you with that. And depending on the solution, it has a lower or higher degree of automation. Our experience is that especially for larger enterprises, they very often have already their chosen solutions, where they have relevant teams trained on that, and where they can very quickly turn around the plannings.
Great. Yeah, so thank you, Sebastian. That's a topic that I'm particularly interested in. So I'm looking forward to see the outcome of your research and the new features being released there. So I would like to now come back on enterprise information architecture, and especially so we hear about this pattern, the semantic layer. We're hearing that, right, as more of a conceptual thing, and knowledge graphs as a set of technologies to implement a semantic layer, right? How do you see that evolve? How do you see this evolving? There are so when we see semantic layer, it is a layer on top of data warehouses or data lakes, between Databricks and Snowflakes and the likes. So how do you see this evolving? What's your take on this, and how do you position yourself there?
This is something we have seen in the last 2, maybe 3 years to get a lot of traction, where people even moved away from thinking of the integration of the data itself and really just took it on a level of I need a semantic layer as kind of the interoperability definition and to understand my information architecture. So it might not even allow you to direct queries in data, but it allows you to understand where the data is, how the data is structured roughly. It allows you to understand the meaning of the data and into which processes, business processes, IT systems, and so on it feeds into. And we have a ton of technologies that promised to solve a lot of those problems. Data lakes, data warehouses, data catalogs. But I think what they all neglected is that you need that tie-in into the business model. You need to have the kind of business objects. So you need to have that understanding of people talk about components, parts, projects, persons, machines, and that is how you have to structure your data. You have to define the relations between that, what you would typically do in ontology or semantic model. And then you have to tie that into an additional modeling layer where you capture those data sources, where you capture the business processes and IT systems, the IT responsibilities, the data classifications, and all of that. And that might come from different systems because you wouldn't start from scratch. You very likely already have a data catalog where all of those data sources are accurate. You most likely have a business glossary where you already have all of those terms defined, but they might not have the relations between them yet. You probably already have various ways of how you are publishing your data via API services or streaming or like a data lake or anything like that. And there are systems where you already tracking the confidentiality and security classifications around data. So all of that has to come together. Then the semantic layer allows us to do the linking between that. And we have seen our customers apply our semantic modeling to that very successfully. So that is something where we also have further expanded the platform to better support that. And by now, I would say probably around 50% of modeling use cases do not just take into account that the business layer, but really the enterprise information architecture and how that all comes together, which is a really interesting development, and I think a completely new application of knowledge for us in a way that I think a few years back we did not necessarily think about the class.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Would you like to, if possible, dive more into like maybe a concrete scenario there? Some experience you had with a client, just to understand, have some actual systems names, domains, and a clearer view of that.
Yeah, so we have built integrations, for example, into Collibra catalogs or Informatica as kind of the business glossary system, pulling the relevant data from there, either materializing or just in a synchronous way, federating it from those systems.
So Collibra is a data governance platform, right? That they do data cataloging. You can assign people to data, how a certain data set is managed by a certain person, what terms business glossaries associated, and all of that.
Yes, exactly. So you can capture a lot of that information already, but what people wanted to have was kind of pulling that into the graph and then being able to align between that. So drawing relations between terms in the business glossary, connecting data sources to that and aligning that, and having it in a very flexible way, building a much stronger interconnected graph versus the information they already have there. That means the graph kind of becomes that central interconnecting piece from where you then jump back into your existing data governance platform and all of the functionality it has there, all of the connectors to pull that data from various systems, all of the governance functionality that you need around change management and so on. But at every point, you can support it with the connected information from your semantic layer, from your graph, to make better decisions. So things that you would usually not have access to, that you will not see that they are connected, now suddenly become connected and make the life of everyone in the information architecture and data governance much easier.
So in that scenario, it's purely integrating, adding a layer over the data from Colibra. There are no other data sources that you also pull in to handle that information, or?
No, there are often additional data sources. There are existing internal inventories, address books, so that you can actually link it up to the individual person correctly. Additional classification systems. We also have cases where we then link this up to like a central streaming platform, where you can even then on demand generate a new stream for a new data product that gets registered in the system. So kind of tying that information together and utilizing that to push out additional information into our system. So it becomes a part of the overall ecosystem that sits somewhere in between. Sometimes it's the consuming system, sometimes it's mostly a system providing information somewhere else. Sometimes our user interface is really just for alignment and mapping between certain data sets and kind of creating that larger understanding of it. Sometimes it is part of the information structure where people get information about it. That's quite those use cases we are seeing there.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned data products, which brings us to another trend from the past few years, data mesh and data products, and become more like organizational frameworks about to work with data. How do you fit in that landscape and those concepts?
Yeah, I think it's I might be simplifying, but it's pretty much the same thing there. So the data product only becomes in my opinion, a real data product if you have that semantic description of it. If people actually can search for it and understand it and manage it by the way the business would talk about it. That's again the part that we deliver into that. So it becomes very often kind of the most important layer to discover, publish, and find data products.
Sounds good. Yeah, I like that. Great. Well, I think I mean kind of covered my questions here. So I want to open it to you here. And is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Well, I think from our side, I think we talked about most of the interesting trends going on. We have recently also embarked into delivering a complete data product, so to say. So we have worked with digital science to put together a large knowledge graph around kind of the global research knowledge compiled from grants, studies, publications, patents. We're also pushing ourselves to build a graph larger than anything we had handled so far. So we're looking at around 33 billion statements just in the core graph, augmented with another 300 billion annotations, connected and federated with additional public data sources that make up probably around 40 billion statements. So this one gigantic graph broken down into a federated architecture that you can then also consume via our platform, where we think we can support research R&D primarily, but probably many more use cases which need access to that very specific data set. So for us, it's a very new thing, something we launched actually just this week at BioIT in Boston, and where we are looking forward to see how the market is going to receive that.
Sounds good. I guess more information on your website. And I've heard there's also a project with the Knowledge Graph Conference.
There is something going on there, yes, and I'm looking forward to being able to launch that one. There's quite some work that went into that over the last weeks and months. So I think that's going to be a big one as well, yes.
Let's leave it there and keep the mystery around that. Great. So, well, thank you very much, Sebastian, for your time. It was great to hear about metaphacts. Well, looking forward to follow the next developments and best of luck.
Thanks a lot, François. It was
And
fun.
thank you for being a sponsor of the Knowledge Graph Conference, returning sponsor. We appreciate it. Bring the whole community
Thank you.
behind me too.
Yes. It's one of our favorite events. I think it's the only event where really the whole knowledge graph community comes together. So happy to be part of that.
Great. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.